Grace Callahan barely stopped her van before jumping out. 3 thugs were already on her porch. One man with tattoos down his arms leaned in her doorway holding a beer. A blonde woman blew smoke in Grace's face. The third, heavy, mean-eyed, was throwing her children's clothes into black trash bags. Grace's voice cracked. "What are you doing in my house?" the tattooed man smirked. "Your house, not anymore, sweetheart." He slammed the door. Her key didn't fit. The lock was new. Behind her, her daughter sobbed, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Grace pounded on the door, screaming for help, until 2 police cars pulled up. But instead of arresting the trespassers, one officer glanced at a fake lease and said quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am, it's a civil matter." That night, Grace and her kids slept in their van, their whole life stuffed in trash bags. But by morning, everything would change. Because 200 Hells Angels had seen her video and they were already riding. This is Heart Tales. Subscribe now, because what happens next will shake the ground beneath them. Let's check in: 1 for first-time viewer, 2 if you've seen a few, 3 if you never miss. Grace Callahan hit the brakes so hard the van lurched. 3 strangers were on her porch, 2 men and a woman hauling boxes through her front door as if they'd lived there forever. The tattooed one leaned against the doorframe, beer in hand, his smile dripping with challenge. The blonde woman exhaled a puff of smoke right toward Grace, while the heavy-set man dragged her children's toys across the lawn like trash. Grace slammed her door and ran toward them, her voice sharp and shaking. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The tattooed man barely glanced at her. "Your house, not anymore, sweetheart. We rent this place now." He held up a crumpled piece of paper, smirking. Grace's hand trembled as she tried her key. It didn't fit. The lock was new. Behind her, 10-year-old Ellie clutched her little brother Noah's hand, eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, why can't we go inside?" Grace swallowed hard. Because someone made a mistake. But deep down she already knew. The tattooed man opened the door again and called over his shoulder. "Babe, looks like we've got company." The blonde woman laughed low and cruel. Guess she didn't get the memo. Grace reached for her phone, voice breaking. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," the man said, stepping closer. "They'll tell you the same thing they told the last lady: civil matters, sweetheart. We've got paperwork." Her heart pounded as she dialed. The sound of the lock clicking shut behind him felt like a coffin closing. When the patrol cars arrived, Grace thought everything would finally make sense. She showed her ID, her mortgage documents, family photos. The officer nodded sympathetically until the squatters produced their own papers. A printed lease, fake dates, a phony notary stamp, even a signature. The older cop, Sergeant Ortiz, studied the sheet, then looked at Grace with a kind of quiet pity. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I believe you. But this is a civil issue now. You'll have to go through the courts." Grace blinked. "Through the courts? This is my home." "The law's complicated," he said, lowering his voice. "If they have documentation, even if it's fake, we can't remove them without a court order." Behind him, the squatters were enjoying the show. The blonde leaned on the porch rails smirking while the tattooed man called out, "Hey, officer, maybe tell her to leave before we press trespassing charges." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "You threw my kids' things into the yard." "Correction," he said. "Our yard." When the officers finally left, Grace stood frozen on the sidewalk, her children crying quietly behind her. The sun was still bright, birds still chirped, neighbors still watched from behind curtains, but everything she knew had collapsed. She walked to the side of the house and saw what they'd done. Her father's old military photographs soaked and trampled in the dirt. Ellie's drawings ripped and scattered across the grass. Her grandmother's quilt mud-stained, torn in 2. She fell to her knees, gathering what she could, tears cutting down her dust-streaked cheeks. A voice broke the silence. "Grace!" It was Mrs. Chen from next door, face pale with horror. "What's happening, squatters?" Grace managed to whisper. They changed the locks. Mrs. Chen looked helplessly toward the house. The police can't, Grace shook her head. They said it's a civil matter. By sunset, Grace was loading black trash bags into a van. Everything they owned now fit in the back seat, broken toys, framed photos, and whatever dignity she had left. The engine sputtered as she started it, and for a moment she just sat there staring at her own front window, now glowing with the squatters' laughter. "Where are we going?" Mom Noah asked from the back. She forced a smile she didn't feel. "We'll figure it out, honey." She parked 3 blocks away under a flickering streetlight, the children asleep in a pile of blankets. Her phone sat in her lap screen, glowing against the dark. She opened the camera, her reflection pale and hollow. "My name is Grace Callahan," she said quietly. "And today, someone stole my house." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. She filmed the van's cramped interior, the trash bags, her sleeping kids. She explained the fake lease, the police, the helplessness. She wasn't looking for money, just advice, maybe a miracle. "If anyone knows a lawyer," she whispered, "or just anything that can help us, please." She uploaded the video to a small community page and set the phone down. The notification tone chimed once, then again, then again. Within an hour, hundreds of people had watched. Some offered sympathy, others anger. "This is insane. Call the media. My cousin's a lawyer." Grace scrolled until her eyes burned. For the first time all day, hope flickered faintly. She didn't notice the comment that would change everything. A profile picture, a bearded man beside a motorcycle, the name Logan Maddox. His message was short. "Where is this Grace?" Almost ignored it. Probably some stranger being nosy. She closed her eyes and drifted off to the sound of distant traffic, unaware that 100 miles away in a clubhouse filled with chrome and leather, a man had just recognized her last name and remembered a promise he'd made to her father 17 years ago. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the windshield, warming the sleeping faces of Ellie and Noah. Grace sat up, slowly stiff from the night's cold. Her phone buzzed with hundreds of new notifications. Her video had gone viral overnight. Tens of thousands of shares, thousands of comments, strangers offering lawyers donations, shelter. And among them, another message from that same profile. "Hang tight. You're not alone." Grace frowned, not knowing the meaning behind those words. But miles away, Logan Maddox, the president of the Hells Angels Riverside Chapter, was gathering his riders. The engines were warming, the call had gone out. By dawn, her nightmare would have witnesses. And the thieves who took her home were about to learn that some debts never die. Grace woke to the vibration of her phone before the sun had even cleared the horizon. The light spilling through the van's cracked windshield was thin and grey, the kind that made everything look colder than it was. Ellie was still curled against her brother, clutching that worn, stuffed rabbit to her chest. Grace rubbed the stiffness from her neck and blinked at the flood of notifications. Overnight, her video had exploded. 3,000 shares, then 5, then 9. Her small town's community forum had become a wildfire, people tagging lawyers, journalists, veterans, even biker groups. The comment section was chaos, anger, sympathy, disbelief, strangers arguing about laws she hadn't known existed. "How is this legal? My sister went through the same thing. Somebody help this woman." Grace scrolled through the blur of words, heart pounding. Then a message appeared at the top of her inbox. Marissa Torres, News Channel 7. "Would you be willing to tell your story on camera? People need to see this." She covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. For the first time in days, she felt something like air in her lungs. Maybe this nightmare was finally being seen. But mixed among the flood of messages were a few that made her pause short, precise, and oddly serious. "Stay strong. We're coming. You're not alone. And again, that name, Logan Maddox. Grace clicked the profile expecting a scam or troll account. Instead, she saw rows of motorcycles lined up in a desert lot, dozens of men and women in leather vests marked with the same patch, Hell's Angels, Riverside Chapter. Her pulse spiked. Her father's stories came rushing back: the winter storm, the stranded riders, the night he'd opened their garage and saved a dozen lives. She sat still for a long time, her father's words echoing faintly. Good people still exist, Gracie. They just don't always wear suits. The van door creaked open and sunlight spilled across the seats. Ellie rubbed her eyes. "Mom, are we going home today?" Grace forced a smile. "Not yet, baby, but we're working on it." 2 hours later, she was in the cramped waiting room of the legal aid office, paperwork clutched to her chest like a life preserver. The air smelled of burnt coffee and old carpet. Jennifer Park, the attorney who'd reached out through the night, emerged from her office, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, with the calm voice of someone who'd seen too many broken systems. "Grace Callahan." Grace stood quickly. "That's me." They sat across from each other at a desk piled with case files. Jennifer read the notes, frowned, then looked up. "You weren't exaggerating. This lease is fraudulent. But under California law, squatters with fake paperwork can still claim temporary tenant rights. We'll file an unlawful detainer lawsuit today, but the court process can take weeks." "Weeks," Grace whispered. "I don't have weeks. I don't even have somewhere to sleep." Jennifer softened. "We'll fast-track it, file under fraud. It might shorten the timeline to a few days." "I've seen this before, and you're not alone anymore. Your videos everywhere. People are talking." Grace exhaled shakily, trying to hold herself together. I can't believe this is real." Jennifer slid a card across the desk. "Believe it, and if anyone contacts you offering help, vet them first. Internet fame attracts both angels and vultures." Grace nodded. She didn't know which kind had found her yet. When she left the office, the street felt different. Drivers were honking in recognition, one woman even shouting from her car window, "We saw your story, stay strong." For the first time, Grace didn't feel invisible. But miles away, inside a weathered concrete building that smelled of motor oil and leather, the sound of engines idling filled the air. Logan Maddox sat at the head of a long wooden table, phone in hand, watching Grace's video for the third time. Around him, a dozen club members waited in silence. He hit pause, the screen frozen on Grace's tear-streaked face. "That's Daniel Callahan's girl," he said quietly. One of the bikers, Rod Hammer Walsh, leaned forward. "You sure?" Logan nodded. "He took us in during that snowstorm back in '08. Saved half the crew from frostbite, refused a dime, told me, help someone else someday." He pocketed his phone and stood. "Looks like someday's here." The room came alive with motion. Boots scuffed, coffee mugs clattered, someone hit the switch that opened the garage door to the morning Sunday. 40 bikes gleamed in rows, chrome flashing like silver teeth. Logan's voice carried over the rumble. "Church meeting. In 15. Full colors. We do this right, legal, clean, loud." By the time the engines roared to life, the neighborhood could hear them miles away. The Hells Angels weren't coming for violence. They were coming for justice, and for a promise made long ago. Back in town, Grace sat parked in front of a diner, scrolling through new messages while her kids munched pancakes inside. Her GoFundMe set up by a stranger had passed $2,000. Local news wanted another interview. She almost let herself smile until she saw a new notification. Riverside Angels are on their way. Noon. Her heart skipped. She didn't know what it meant, but something told her this wasn't another online comment. This was real. She closed her phone, glanced through the diner window at Ellie and Noah, and whispered to herself, "Dad, I wish you were here." The hum of engines began faintly in the distance, first like thunder over the hills, then louder, deeper, closer. Glasses rattled on diner tables, heads turned toward the windows. Grace didn't know it yet, but her father's kindness 17 years earlier had just set an army in motion. And by the time the sun reached its peak, that army would arrive at her doorstep, turning one mother's cry for help into the loudest kind of justice. The garage door slammed shut behind the last rider, sealing in the sound of rumbling engines and low voices. The Hells Angels Riverside Chapter hadn't gathered like this in years. The air smelled of oil-burnt coffee and adrenaline. At the head of the long wooden table, Logan Maddox stood silently, a photo album in one hand, and Grace Callahan's video paused on the big TV behind him. Her tear-streaked face filled the screen, lit by the glow of her phone inside that van. The room was still. "Most of you don't know this name," Logan began, his gravel-thick voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Grace Callahan, single mom. 2 kids, house stolen by lowlifes with fake papers. Police can't help her. But 17 years ago, her father did something none of us forgot." He flipped open the photo album. A snapshot, faded edges curling, showed a group of bikers standing in a garage surrounded by snow. The men in the room leaned forward, drawn in by the history hanging in his words. "December 2008, Logan continued. "We were coming back from the toy run for the children's hospital. Blizzard hit out of nowhere. Temperatures dropped so fast we couldn't even feel the clutch. Every hotel was booked. We were freezing to death out there." He tapped the photo, voice steady but heavy, and then a pickup pulled over. Out stepped Captain Daniel Callahan, Marine Corps. He told us to follow him, opened his garage, fired up space heaters, made soup, coffee, even lent us his kids' blankets, saved a dozen of us that night. A murmur ran through the group. Some of the older members nodded, slowly, faces softening with recognition. Rod Hammer Walsh, their sergeant-at-arms, spoke up. He wouldn't take a dime. Said we'd already paid enough just wearing those patches. Logan smiled faintly. "He told me, 'Help someone else someday, Logan. Pass it forward.' Well, it's time we did." He turned to Aria Vale, the club's vice president, her long silver hair tied back beneath a faded red bandana. She'd spent years working as a paralegal before trading her office heels for riding boots. "What's the legal ground here?" Logan asked. Aria flipped through a tablet stacked with case files. "The house is in Grace's name, clear title, taxes paid." The squatters filed a fake lease, forged notary stamp. "Under California law, it's still a civil case, but we can expose them. If we record enough violations, trespassing, property damage, harassment, it builds pressure. With public attention, the DA might fast-track criminal fraud. So we don't fight them," Logan said. "We bury them in truth." The men around the table exchanged glances. They were used to thunder, not paperwork. But when Logan spoke, nobody argued. "Ghost," he said, using Aria's road name. "You're in charge of documentation. Photos, videos, timestamps. Keep it airtight." She nodded, calm and composed. "Already prepping gear." Juice Logan continued, pointing to a lean man with camera tattoos down his arms. "Social media live streams every angle. We go public. Let the world see what's happening." Juice grinned. Hashtag justice. Logan didn't smile. Hashtag truth. A low laugh rippled through the room. "And Hammer," Logan said, locking eyes with his old friend. "Coordinate with local news. Someone from Channel 7 wants a story. Let's give them one." Rod nodded. "What about law enforcement? Ortiz won't want a circus." Logan set the photo album down and met every eye in the room. "We don't break laws. We don't touch those squatters. We stay on public property. We stay visible and we stay loud. They wanted to steal a home, fine. But we're going to steal back their peace." The room erupted in applause, fists pounding the table. The heavy air filled with something electric purpose. Maria Ghostvale stood, voice steady but sharp. Grace doesn't know we're coming, no, Logan said. Let her focus on the legal fight. We'll be the reinforcement she never saw coming. The younger bikers shifted, restless with anticipation. The older ones looked grimly determined. They'd all been burned by systems that didn't care: foreclosures, layoffs, false charges. Grace's fight wasn't just hers anymore, it was theirs too. Aria's voice cut through the buzz. There's one more thing. These squatters, Travis Cole, Britt Logan and Nate Brewer, I ran their names. Travis has open warrants in Nevada for fraud. Britt's facing charges in Arizona for identity theft. And Brewer's on probation for assault. Logan's jaw tightened. They picked the wrong house. Yeah, Rod muttered. The wrong damn town. Logan looked around at them, 40 men and women bound by loyalty, forged through fire loss and long roads. He raised his voice just enough to slice through the noise. We ride at dawn, he said. Full colors. Every bike that can roll. We make sure those thieves know exactly who they stole from. And we make sure Grace Callahan never stands alone again. The response came like thunder. For Callahan, hands slammed the table boot, stomped, and the garage shook with the roar of engines igniting one by one. Outside, the rising sun painted the asphalt gold. Chrome gleamed, tires rolled. The hellsangels were awake. As the roar built into a unified hum, Logan stepped aside and opened the album one last time. The photo of Captain Daniel Callahan stared back at him, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and a little girl perched on his lap. Logan traced the edge of the picture with his thumb and whispered, "You saved us, Captain. Time to return the favor." He slipped the album into his saddlebag, swung his leg over his Harley, and fired up the engine. The sound reverberated through his chest, a heartbeat made of thunder. As he pulled onto the open road, the others fell in behind him, engines merging into a single relentless storm. The plan was simple: gather evidence, bring the truth, and remind the world that family doesn't end with blood. And as the desert wind rushed against his face, Logan thought of Grace's children asleep in that van. He imagined Daniel Callahan's voice, steady, warm, proud, and pressed harder on the throttle. By sunrise, Oakridge Drive would tremble. By the time Grace Callahan turned onto Oakridge Drive, the afternoon sun was blazing across the street like a spotlight. She was coming back from the courthouse, exhaustion sitting heavy in her chest after hours of paperwork and hollow reassurances. Ellie and Noah sat quietly in the back seat, clutching paper cups of juice from a gas station. The van's engine sputtered as it crept closer to home, the home that no longer felt like hers. Then she saw it. For a second, Grace thought she was dreaming. The entire street shimmered with chrome and leather. 12 motorcycles stood in a perfect line across her front yard, their engines idling low heat, rippling from the exhausts. Men and women in black vests marked with the Hells Angels Riverside Chapter patch moved with military precision. No chaos, no shouting, just quiet control. Grace slammed the brakes, her mouth falling open. "Mom," Ellie whispered, pressing her face to the window. "Who are they?" Before Grace could answer, the front door of her house creaked open. Travis Cole, the tattooed squatter, stepped onto the porch, his earlier arrogance replaced by something else. Unease. He squinted at the rows of bikes gleaming under the sun, then at the riders, watching him without a word. Beside him, Britt hovered in the doorway, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Grace stepped out slowly, her heart thudding. The nearest rider, a tall, broad man with a trimmed beard and calm, steady eyes, approached her. His leather vest was heavy with patches, the largest reading President. "Grace Callahan?" he asked. She nodded cautiously. "Yes." He extended his hand. "Name's Logan Maddox. Your father saved my life once. 17 years ago, in a snowstorm." Grace froze. "You knew my dad?" Logan's voice softened. "We were freezing to death on the highway. He saw us, brought us into his garage, fed us, kept us alive, said we could repay him someday by helping someone else. When I saw your video last night, I recognized the house. He turned slightly, glancing at the porch where Travis stood stiff as stone. Now we're here to make sure his kindness doesn't die with him. Grace's throat tightened. But the police said we're not here to break laws, Logan interrupted, calm but firm. We're here to make sure those who did face the law. He gestured behind him. A woman with silver hair, Aria Vale, was holding a tablet, taking photos of every damaged window, every pile of trash in the yard. Another biker, younger, worked a professional camera, filming the squatters from the sidewalk. Aria stepped forward, her tone professional. Grace, I've already documented illegal dumping and property damage. It'll strengthen your case. We'll file everything with the DA by morning. Grace blinked, barely able to process what was happening. You're lawyers, some of us, Aria said with a small smile. Some of us just know what justice looks like. From the porch, Travis found his voice. You can't be here, he barked. This is harassment. I'll call the cops. Logan turned toward him slowly, his expression unreadable. Go ahead, we'll wait. Britt muttered something and disappeared back inside. Travis hesitated, realizing every move he made was being recorded from at least 3 angles. A low rumble filled the air as more engines approached. 3 more bikes rolled in, parking beside the first line. Neighbors began stepping outside, drawn by the sound. The retired couple from across the street, the Chen family from next door, even the mailman who stopped mid-route to watch. Mom Noah whispered, tugging Grace's sleeve. They're not scary. They're helping. Grace looked at Logan again. The sincerity in his eyes cut through every fear she'd carried since that lock first refused to turn. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. Don't, he replied. You've got enough to handle. We'll take care of this part. At that moment, a white news van turned the corner. The logo on the side read Channel 7 News. A reporter jumped out with a camera operator close behind. Aria stepped forward to meet them all business. You're on time, she said. Here's everything you'll want to see. Grace's stomach fluttered. You called the news, Logan nodded. Public eyes keep people honest, especially people like him. He tilted his chin toward Travis, who was now pacing behind the porch rail, shouting into his phone. The reporter approached Grace, carefully recognizing her from the viral video. Miss Callahan, could we ask a few questions? Grace hesitated, glancing at Logan. He gave a small nod. Tell your story. Let them hear you. With her children standing beside her, Grace faced the camera. Her voice trembled but didn't break. My name is Grace Callahan. This was my father's house. He served in the Marines. He left it to me. And a week ago, strangers broke in and claimed it was theirs. The police said they couldn't help. Her hands tightened around Ellie's shoulders. But these people, these bikers, they showed up because my dad once helped them. Because sometimes good comes back when you least expect it. The reporter's mic quivered in her hand as she listened. Around them, the riders stood quietly, arms crossed, forming a wall of presence that made the entire street feel like sacred ground. Inside the house, Travis's voice rose again. You're all insane. This is intimidation. You can't do this. Logan didn't even look at him. No one's touching you, Travis. We're on public property filming a news report. But you might want to tell the truth before that camera finds out who you really are. Travis froze. Rod Hammer Walsh walked up, tablet in hand, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. You're Travis Cole. 3 outstanding warrants, fraud, forgery, and criminal mischief. Your girlfriend Britt Logan has 2 pending identity theft charges, and your buddy Nate Brewer's on probation. The color drained from Travis's face. Grace stared, shocked. How do you know all that? Hammer shrugged. Public records. You'd be surprised what the internet tells you when you know where to look, the neighbors murmured. Someone clapped quietly. The reporter's cameraman zoomed in on Travis, who stumbled back inside, slamming the door. Logan watched the curtain twitch, then turned to Grace. "He's scared now. That's good. Fear keeps people honest too." Grace swallowed hard, still overwhelmed. "I don't know how any of this is happening." Logan smiled faintly. "It's called paying a debt. Your dad saved our lives. We're just keeping the promise." Behind them, another wave of engines rumbled closer, more riders, more vests, more chrome catching the sunlight. The sight made the crowd gasp. Ellie looked up at her mother, eyes wide. "Are they all here for us?" Grace knelt beside her, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yeah, baby, they're all here for us." Arya checked her watch, looking at Logan. "You wanted visibility. You've got it. Half the city's watching the live stream." Logan nodded, eyes fixed on the house. "Good. Let them." For the first time in days, Grace felt something she hadn't dared to feel: control. Around her, the hum of engines was steady, powerful, protective. And for the first time, Travis Cole wasn't the one holding the power anymore. By late afternoon, the story was spreading faster than Grace could imagine. Social media posts of the Hells Angels lined up on Oakridge Drive flooded timelines with the caption, "When justice fails, loyalty rides." But Grace didn't know that inside the house Travis was pacing like a caged animal. His voice was low, furious. "They can't stay out there forever," he snarled to Britt. "Once the cameras leave, we'll make them pay." What he didn't know, what Grace didn't either, was that the bikers had no plans to leave. This was just the beginning, and when dawn came, the entire neighborhood would learn what 200 roaring engines and one unpaid debt could do when justice wore leather and loyalty had a name. By sunset, Oakridge Drive looked like a standoff caught in amber light. The bikers hadn't moved, still lined up along the curb like a wall of steel. Grace sat on the hood of her van, her kids beside her, watching the house that no longer felt like home. Logan Maddox stood nearby, arms folded, eyes fixed on the porch where Travis Cole paced like a cornered dog. News crews had packed up for the day, but a few reporters lingered, sensing the story wasn't done. Neighbors stayed on their lawns, whispering, filming with phones. The tension was a live wire, one spark away from chaos. Inside, Travis's voice carried through the open windows. "They think they can scare me, I'll show them." The curtain moved, revealing his face, flushed, furious, wild. Logan didn't blink. "Keep the cameras rolling," he murmured to Arya Vale, who was seated on the curb with her tablet. "He's about to make our case for us. At 5:30, the first blow landed." Britt Logan stormed out of the house with a twisted grin, walked straight to the sidewalk, and kicked over a small pink bicycle. Ellie's. The front wheel bent, the handle scraped the pavement. The little girl gasped. "That's mine," she cried, trying to run forward, but Grace caught her. Arya lifted her camera instantly, her voice calm. "Property destruction. Time stamped on record." Britt smirked at the bikers. "Oops." Logan's jaw flexed, but his voice stayed steady. "Don't move. She wants a reaction." Then came the music, blasting through the walls so loud it shook windows down the block. Heavy metal, full-volume bass like an earthquake. "Mister!" Chen from next door clutched his ears, shouting over the noise. "I have a pacemaker. I can't take this." Arya dialed the police immediately. "Noise ordinance violation," she said crisply. "We'll add that to the report." 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. The same officer, Sergeant Ortiz, stepped out, weary but alert. He walked straight to the porch, shouting above the music. "Turn it down now!" Travis appeared, smiling mockingly. "We're tenants. We have rights." Ortiz scribbled a citation. "You're also disturbing the peace." Travis snatched the paper and tore it in half right in front of him. Ortiz's expression didn't change. "That's destruction of a legal document." He wrote another. The crowd watching laughed quietly. Travis's face reddened. He turned back toward the door, kicking it open so hard it rattled on its hinges. Inside, Britt screamed something indistinct. A glass shattered. Then silence. Grace exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of her van. "How long do we have to endure this?" "As long as it takes for the courts to catch up," Arya said. "But we're close. The DA's office is reviewing the evidence." Logan glanced at her tablet. "And they'll have plenty to review by morning." The last bit of daylight faded. The bikers stayed where they were, engines silent now, just watching. Their presence alone kept Travis from stepping outside again. But inside, the sound of angry footsteps echoed, restless brewing. Around 8:00 p.m., Grace heard a clatter from the side yard. She turned and froze. Nate Brewer was dragging more of her belongings into the trash, her father's old toolbox, a few framed photos, even a folded flag from his Marine service. Logan moved before Grace could, striding across the lawn. His voice was low but thunderous. "Put it down." Nate froze. He looked up and met Logan's stare, steady, unflinching. Arya raised her camera, capturing the scene. Nate muttered something, dropped the items and retreated toward the door. "Good choice," Logan said. Grace crouched and picked up the folded flag, her hands trembling. It was dirty but intact. She brushed off the dust, holding it against her chest. "He served 20 years, she whispered. Logan's voice softened. "Then he's still serving now." For a few minutes, peace returned until 9:00 p.m. A sudden crash shattered the quiet. Something hit the driveway. Grace turned, her heart stalling. An urn. Her father's ashes. The ceramic shattered, scattering grey dust across the concrete like spilled sand. Grace screamed and ran forward, but Logan caught her before she reached the porch. She struggled, tears blurring her vision. "Let me go. He threw my dad, he threw him." Logan held her firmly. "That's what he wants. Don't give him what he wants." Travis appeared in the upstairs window holding a beer. "Oops," he said, voice dripping venom. "Clumsy me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Arya's voice shook for the first time. "Desecration of human remains. That's a felony." Grace collapsed to her knees, scooping the ashes with shaking hands. Ellie and Noah knelt beside her, silent and crying. The bikers closed in around them, forming a protective ring so the cameras couldn't see their grief. Logan knelt too, his hand resting gently on Grace's shoulder. "He just crossed a line," he said quietly. He pulled out his phone, opened the group message for every Hells Angels chapter in California, and typed one line: "Emergency call. Oakridge Drive. 6 a.m. Bring everyone." Within minutes, replies started lighting the screen. Los Angeles rolling out, 40 bikes. San Diego, 38 confirmed. Sacramento, 50 strong. Orange County en route. Logan watched the responses scroll, each message louder than the last. A tide was coming. Grace was still kneeling, her palms grey with ash. "Why would anyone do this?" she whispered. "Because evil mistakes kindness for weakness," Logan said, his voice calm as steel. "Tomorrow we remind them they were wrong." He stood, turned to the riders. "No more watching. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we ride." The engines roared to life one by one, echoing down the street like rolling thunder. The sound wasn't anger, it was a promise. Grace watched through her tears as Logan looked back toward the house, eyes hard. "You wanted attention, Travis. You're about to have the whole states." Then he climbed onto his bike and the roar deepened. One by one, the riders peeled away into the night, the noise fading until only the crickets remained. Grace stayed there in the driveway, the ashes of her father gathered in a small jar. Arya had found the folded flag beside her. She looked up at the stars through the streetlight haze, whispering, "I wish you could see this, Dad." Behind her, Arya placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "He will. Tomorrow he'll see everything." And as Grace closed her eyes, the sound of engines still echoed faintly in the distance, rising, spreading, multiplying. The angels were coming, and by dawn Oakridge Drive would tremble under the weight of justice. The first rumble came just before sunrise, rolling across the valley like thunder trapped under the earth. Mrs. Chen, half awake, thought it was an earthquake at first. But then the sound grew deeper, heavier, an army of engines rising in perfect rhythm. By 5:45 a.m., the quiet streets of Oakridge Drive were trembling. The morning light was thin and gold, stretching long shadows over the pavement. And from every direction, north, south, east, west, the Hells Angels were coming. 200 motorcycles glinted beneath the dawn, their chrome catching fire in the Sunday. Logan Maddox led the pack, his red and white vest flapping against the wind. Behind him came riders from Los Angeles, San Diego, Sacramento, Orange County, Fresno, even as far as the Bay Area, every chapter that had read his midnight call. The procession was silent, except for the engines. No shouting, no horns, just the synchronized roar of loyalty rolling through the sleeping town. Grace Callahan stepped out of her van barefoot, still wearing the same clothes she'd cried in the night before. She froze when she saw them, row after row of motorcycles cresting the hill, their headlights cutting through the mist. Her children woke to the sound, pressing their faces to the windows, their eyes wide with wonder. Mom, Ellie whispered, "Is it them?" Grace could barely breathe. "Yeah, baby," she said. "It's them." The first bikes reached her street at 5:57 a.m. Logan pulled into position right in front of her driveway, killed his engine, and lifted his hand. One by one, the others followed, 200 engines silenced in unison, leaving behind a heartbeat of stillness so profound it made the air hum. Neighbors poured out of their homes, still in robes and slippers. The sound had drawn them all. Windows opened, cameras lifted. By the time the last rider parked, Oakridge Drive looked like a fortress built of leather, steel, and purpose. Grace took a step forward, tears already burning her eyes. "You actually came," she whispered. Logan removed his helmet and smiled faintly. "We said we would." From the porch, Travis Cole's curtain twitched. He peered out, expecting maybe a dozen bikers. What he saw instead turned his blood cold. 200 riders stood in perfect formation, engines, gleaming flags snapping gently in the morning breeze. "What the hell?" he muttered. Behind him, Britt's voice trembled. "Travis, they're everywhere!" He turned sharply. "Shut up! I'll handle it." But his hands were shaking. Outside, Logan climbed onto the bed of a pickup truck parked near Grace's lawn. The rising sun painted him in light. As he looked over the crowd, bikers, neighbors, reporters, all gathered in silence. "My name's Logan Maddox," he said, his voice deep and even. "I'm president of the Hells Angels Riverside Chapter. 17 years ago, a Marine named Captain Daniel Callahan saved 12 of our lives during a snowstorm. He gave us shelter, food, and warmth when no one else would. He asked for nothing, only that we help someone else someday. That day is today." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "This house belongs to his daughter, Grace Callahan," Logan continued. "Criminals broke in, forged papers, and threw her and her kids onto the street. The system said it's a civil matter. Well," he looked straight at the house, "we're the civil matter now." Laughter and cheers erupted from the bikers, the sound rolling like thunder across the cul-de-sac. Logan lifted a hand and silence returned. "We're not here for violence. We're here for justice. We're staying legal. We're staying visible. But we're not leaving until this family gets their home back." The applause that followed wasn't just noise, it was defiance. Aria Vale stepped forward, holding a megaphone. Her voice carried crisp and strong. "We've documented 23 violations in 48 hours, property damage, harassment, destruction of legal documents, desecration of human remains. Every second of it's been sent to the DA's office. Today the court will hear this case and the world will too. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed. Grace stood beside Logan, her children clinging to her sides. She wasn't crying anymore. She stood tall, her chin high, her father's folded flag in her hands. The sound of another engine broke through the crowd. A black and white police cruiser rolled slowly into view. Sergeant Ortiz stepped out, sunglasses hiding his eyes, and looked around at the impossible sight. 200 bikers standing at ease, every one of them quiet. "Got a call about a disturbance," Ortiz said, voice neutral. Logan smiled slightly. "No disturbance here, Sergeant. Just concerned citizens on public property." Ortiz glanced at Grace, then at the house, then back at Logan. For a moment he said nothing. Then his mouth curved into the smallest of smiles. "Carry on then. Just keep it peaceful." Logan nodded. Wouldn't have it any other way. As Ortiz turned to leave, he paused beside Grace. "The DA called me this morning," he said quietly. "Emergency eviction hearings at 10. The judge doesn't take kindly to fraud. Be there." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "Are you serious?" Ortiz nodded once. "Be ready to take your keys back." Then he got into his car and drove off, the sunlight glinting off the cruiser's hood. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Logan looked at Grace, the corner of his mouth lifting. "You heard the man. Time to win this the right way." But inside the house, panic had set in. Travis and Britt were packing hastily, throwing clothes into trash bags, arguing in frantic whispers. Nate peered out the back window. "They've got us surrounded," he said, voice cracking. "Even the alleys are blocked." Travis glared at him. "We wait it out. Cameras'll get bored. They'll leave." He was wrong, because while news drones hovered overhead, streaming live feeds across the state, the bikers stood firm, arms crossed, a silent army of witnesses. The hashtag number Justice for Grace began trending across social media within an hour. By 8:00 a.m., coffee trucks had arrived, serving drinks to reporters and bikers alike. Local businesses donated food. Someone started a donation fund that passed $50,000 before breakfast. Grace didn't even know it was happening faster than she could breathe. Ellie tugged her sleeve. "Mom, look." Grace turned. Every biker had taken off their sunglasses. 200 faces, hard-weathered, determined, were turned toward her house. No one spoke. No one moved. The message was clear. This is over when you say it's over. She looked at Logan, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this for us?" He met her eyes. "Because your dad did it for us first." At 9:30, Aria tapped Logan's shoulder. "It's time. Grace needs to be at the courthouse." Logan nodded. "Hammer Ghost Tommy, you're with her. The rest of us hold the line." As Grace climbed into her van, escorted by a dozen bikes, the street erupted in cheers. The engines flared to life, echoing through the morning air like a battle cry. She rolled down her window, tears spilling freely now, and waved to the crowd. Back on Oakridge Drive, Logan stayed behind, watching the house with cold focus. Inside, Travis pulled the curtain back one last time. Their eyes met through the glass. One man standing behind lies, the other behind truth. Logan tilted his head slightly, the faintest smile on his lips. "Your move," he muttered, and as the sunlight flooded the street, every biker revved their engines in unison, shaking the ground beneath the house. The roar carried for miles, a warning, a promise, and a eulogy for greed. By dawn, the angels had ridden not for glory or vengeance, but for a single mother who'd lost everything. And they were far from finished. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and coffee when Grace Callahan walked in, her nerves coiled tight. She wore a clean shirt Aria had found for her and clutched the folder of documents like a shield. Behind her, 12 bikers followed, Hammer Ghost and the others, leather vests and silent purpose filling the hallway. People turned to look. Even the bailiff straightened when he saw the patches. Inside the small courtroom, the morning light spilled through tall windows. Judge Richardson, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, took her seat and adjusted her glasses. "Case of Callahan versus Cole," she said. "Emergency hearing regarding unlawful occupation of private property." Grace's heart pounded as the defendants entered. Travis Cole looked exhausted, his bravado gone. Britt trailed behind makeup, smeared, avoiding eye contact. Their lawyer, a sweaty man named Brina, shuffled papers with the energy of a sinking ship. Jennifer Park, Grace's attorney, stood beside her and whispered, "Let me do the talking." The judge's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Brenner, I've reviewed your client's lease. Do you have anything to add before I address the fraud report?" Brenner stammered, "Your Honor, my clients are lawful tenants. They entered into a valid lease agreement which lists a property manager named Robert Davidson." Judge Richardson interrupted. "A man who, according to the DA's office, doesn't exist." She held up the document. The notary stamp was stolen from a bank in Nevada. "The signatures are forged. And your clients," she glanced over her glasses, "have 3 outstanding warrants between them." The color drained from Travis's face. Grace's throat tightened as the judge continued. "Miss Callahan has provided mortgage statements, tax records and utility bills for the past 7 years. Photos of her family living in this home as recently as last week. This court finds her ownership uncontested and the lease fraudulent." She slammed her gavel once. "Immediate order of possession granted. The defendants have until 2:00 p.m. today to vacate. The Sheriff's Department will enforce if necessary. Miss Callahan is awarded $15,000 in damages and all legal fees." Grace blinked. "Did she just—" Jennifer squeezed her arm, smiling. "She did! You just got your house back!" Travis shot up from his chair. "This is ridiculous. They're harassing us, those bikers." Judge Richardson raised a hand. "Mr. Cole, I suggest you stop talking before I hold you in contempt. You're lucky I'm not issuing a bench warrant this second. Leave my courtroom, now." He froze, then turned sharply and stormed out, Britt scurrying behind him. Grace sat down hard, dizzy with relief. The gavel still echoed in her ears. After everything, the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the ashes on the pavement, it was over. Outside, the late morning sun was bright and warm. The street in front of the courthouse was lined with motorcycles. 200 engines idled low, waiting. The crowd parted when Grace stepped through the doors, Jennifer and the bikers behind her. Logan Maddox was sitting astride his Harley, a folded piece of paper in his hand. He swung off the bike and met her halfway, his smile small but proud. "It's done," Grace nodded, her voice breaking. "It's done." He handed her the eviction order, stamped and sealed. "Then let's go finish it." The ride back to Oakridge Drive felt like a victory parade. Police cruisers cleared the way, the rumble of engines rolling ahead like thunder. Neighbors spilled into yards. As the convoy appeared, the red and white patches glinting in the Sunday. When they pulled up to the house, Travis and his crew were already on the lawn, stuffing belongings into trash bags. A sheriff's deputy stood beside them, expression stone cold. Logan parked first, stepped forward and handed Travis the order. "You have until 2 o'clock, he said evenly. "I'd start moving." Travis looked at the paper, then at the rows of bikes stretching down the street. Something inside him cracked. "We're leaving," he muttered. The next hour passed like slow-motion justice. One by one, the squatters carried their bags to a dented sedan, every eye on the street following their walk of shame. No one yelled, no one celebrated. The silence was louder than any revenge could have been. At 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the deadline, the car rolled away. Cameras clicked, engines roared. Grace stood in her driveway holding the keys Sergeant Ortiz had just returned to her. Logan came up beside her, nodding toward the door. "Go on," he said. Her hand trembled as she slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The door opened. Light spilled through the hallway. Ellie and Noah rushed past her, laughing through tears. Grace followed, standing in the doorway, the smell of home flooding her senses. Broken or not, it was theirs again. Behind her, Logan adjusted his vest, watching the kids run from room to room. He gave her a small smile. "Welcome home, Grace." Outside, the engines of 200 Hell's Angels roared in unison, a sound not of rebellion but of honor. And for the first time since the day the lock had turned against her, Grace Callahan felt peace. The moment the squatter's car disappeared down the street, silence settled over Oakridge Drive. Grace Callahan stood in the doorway of her home, the key still warm in her hand, the sound of the Hell's Angels engines fading into a low hum behind her. The air smelled of dust, oil and sunlight, a strange mix of ruin and renewal. She stepped inside and froze. The house was a wreck. Trash scattered across the floor, walls scuffed, drawers overturned. Her children's toys were broken, her father's framed photo cracked on the carpet. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Then Logan Maddox's voice came from behind her, calm and steady. "We're not done yet." Grace turned. Logan was standing at the threshold with a soft smile, sleeves rolled up, flanked by a dozen riders carrying boxes, mops, paint cans and tool belts. "What are you doing?" she asked, still stunned. "Your dad gave us shelter," Logan said simply. "We're giving it back." Within minutes, the house came alive with movement. Boots thudded across the floorboards. Aria Vale coordinated from her tablet, assigning crews to every room, like a general commanding a battle of restoration. "Kitchen first," she said. "Hammer, take the windows. Louise, you and Tommy start on the porch." A biker named Jackie, a professional cleaner by trade, tied her hair back and snapped on gloves. "Let's make this place shine." Grace stood motionless, tears sliding silently down her face as she watched them work. Tommy and another rider hauled out black trash bags, filling a dumpster that had appeared in the driveway within minutes. Someone vacuumed the hallway. Others scrubbed the kitchen counters, wiped away graffiti, and patched holes in the drywall. No one complained, no one stopped. They worked as if fixing the house were a sacred duty. Outside, Noah and Ellie stood on the porch, watching as more bikers rolled up with supplies. One truck carried new furniture, another unloaded a queen-sized mattress wrapped in plastic. Louise, the furniture store owner, winked at Grace. "You're not sleeping on anything they touched. This one's on me." Grace tried to protest, but her voice wouldn't come. In the backyard, others repaired the broken fence and repainted Ellie's swing set a bright blue. Someone even planted new flowers along the walkway, sunflowers and wild daisies bending toward the light. By mid-afternoon, the chaos had become transformation. The house smelled of soap and fresh paint instead of decay. The floors gleamed, the walls looked new. Aria handed Grace a set of clean plates. "Yours," she said with a smile. "We found them shoved in a closet." Ellie came running from her room holding a stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, its torn ear neatly stitched with a pink ribbon. "Miss Jackie fixed him," she squealed. Grace knelt, hugging both her children, laughter and tears tangled together. For the first time, the house felt alive again. As the sun dipped, low golden light filled the living room. Logan found Grace standing in her father's old workshop, staring at the tools neatly hung back on the wall. In her hands was the cracked photo of Captain Daniel Callahan in uniform, his proud smile unbroken despite the damage. Logan stepped forward, holding something folded in his palm, a worn leather patch, its edges frayed from age. The red and white embroidery read Captain Daniel Callahan, Honorary Hell's Angel. "We made this for him after that winter," Logan said quietly. "Never got the chance to give it to him." Grace's vision blurred. "He would have been so proud." Logan nodded. He already is. He pulled a hammer from his belt, found a spot beside the doorframe, and nailed the patch there gently. The leather caught the evening light, glowing warm against the wood. "Your home's protected now," he said. "Always will be." Outside, the riders were gathering the engines, warming again. Neighbors stood on lawns with cameras and tears, waving as the angels prepared to leave. Grace walked out with Ellie and Noah, their faces streaked with sunlight. Logan put on his helmet, then looked back one last time. "You ever need anything," he said, "you call." Grace smiled through tears. "I don't think I could ever thank you enough." "You already did," he said, nodding toward the patch. He did. He raised his fist in salute. The riders followed 200 fists against the setting Sunday. Then the engines roared, one unified sound that shook the air, not with anger, but with honor. As the last of them turned the corner, Grace stood in her driveway, her children beside her, the repaired house glowing behind them. The patch gleamed in the fading light, and for a moment she could almost hear her father's voice. "Good people still exist. They'll show up when you need them most." She closed her eyes, smiling through the quiet, and whispered, "Yeah, Dad." They did. If this story touched you, take a moment to remember, justice doesn't always wear a badge, and kindness never dies. It just waits for its moment to ride again. Grace's father believed good people would show up when they were needed most, and he was right. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. If you believe the world still has room for compassion, loyalty, and courage, subscribe to Heart Tales and share this story with someone who needs hope tonight. Because here we don't just tell stories, we keep the spirit of humanity alive, one heartbeat, one act of kindness at a time.